People snickered behind napkins when I spoke. They didn't even try to hide it. At my own anniversary dinner, crystal glittering like ice and a string quartet warming the room with something gentle, I lifted a glass and told them that my wife, my young wife, Alina, was pregnant. The laughter started as a tremor and then spread like a stain. I saw it first in the eyes of my board members, then the smirk of my attorney, then the low cough of a grandson who couldn't keep himself from grinning. Someone muttered the word impossible. Someone else said miracle with a tone that turned the word into a bruise. I felt the sound travel through me, a cold ripple, as if the blood inside my chest had suddenly turned to thin, bitter tea. I am not naive. My hands carry the map of my years. My name carries the weight of an empire. I earned both. I also know how rooms behave. The dining hall at Hawthorne House can seat 50 under the coffered ceiling, but when it decides to be cruel, it shrinks, and tonight it felt the size of a coffin. Alina's face remained unreadable, as it often did in public. Her fingers, pale and steady, rested on the linen as if anchoring herself to the world. I had prepared for this moment. I had rehearsed a smile, a gracious nod, the shrug of an old man seasoned enough to shrug at mockery. Instead, I watched forks pause mid-air and saw in their stillness the verdict of a chorus. 81-year-old men do not make heirs, they were certain. 81-year-old men make headlines and mistakes. The quartet played on as if to buffer my humiliation. Ice cracked in a glass, a delicate scream. My goddaughter, Lena, tilted her head in sympathy I did not ask for. Across the table, my eldest son, Daniel, lifted his eyebrows in the same way his mother had when she doubted a story. He was already calculating the dilution of his inheritance. He has his mother's sharpness, which once cut me open and then somehow kept me alive. I know what he was thinking, what all of them were thinking. If Alina bore a child, everything would shift. The trusts, the line, the gravitational field of our name. They were not merely laughing at me. They were defending their futures with cruelty disguised as humor. Alina turned her palm over and found my hand beneath the tablecloth. The contact steadied me and enraged me at once. I had loved her, or at least I had loved the world as it looked standing beside her. Light refashioned itself around her in a way I envied. I had also tolerated her secrets because I had my own, but the laugh wound itself around my ribs and pulled tight, and a single simple thought set in my bones like forged iron. I will not be mocked in my own house, not by men I made, not by family that I fed, not by ghosts haunting expensive suits. The old do not win by shouting. We win by remembering. I remembered the names of the men who smirked. I remembered the obligations they owed me, decades of them, and the favors they would prefer dust to cover. I remembered every clause in my will, and I remembered what I'd already set in motion the moment the test turned blue and Alina stood barefoot on the cold marble of our bathroom, tears clinging to her lashes as if afraid to fall. The contingency plans, the sealed envelopes, the cameras I had installed, the calls I had placed, the one decision that would redraw every line in the map of my family. I raised my glass again. The room quieted, reluctantly, like a beast called to heel. To new life, I said, and my own voice sounded unfamiliar, like a man I had met once on a winter street, a man with nothing to lose. I drank. I smiled, slow and thin. And as their stale laughter died in the silk of the music and the clink of silver, I made a vow so calm it frightened me. I would make them swallow their scorn, syllable by syllable, until it tasted like ash. They thought the joke belonged to me. They had no idea they were already inside a story I had written. But the worst was yet to come. My name is Harold Whitmore, and for half a century my signature could open doors other men didn't even know existed. Whitmore Industries put its name on bridges, hospitals, museums, and the quiet hush of private deals that altered skylines. I married young, failed bravely, and tried again. Loss salted me into something harder. When my second wife died, Our children stood in rows like solemn trees, and the house filled with sympathy that felt like smoke. I told myself that love after grief would be like sunlight after an eclipse, unexpected, thin, and temporary. Then I met Alina in a gallery in Newport, the year I turned 79. She was 32, opinionated in a way that didn't apologize, and radiant with the unspent electricity of a life not yet threaded with regret. She looked at my paintings as if they owed her answers, and at me as if I owed none. I had built habits like walls, and she walked through them as if they were fog. We married quietly and loudly all at once, a private ceremony on the cliff walk, then a gala everyone pretended they didn't know was a victory lap. People called me foolish when they were kind, delusional when they'd had a drink. It didn't matter then. I enjoyed her company. I enjoyed the way the world rearranged itself in our presence. She enjoyed the arrangement. We travelled. We learned each other's inventories of silence. She liked oranges and old movies. I liked waking to find someone's hair on my pillow again. We were careful not to pretend we were the same species. That care is its own kind of truth. The night she told me she was pregnant, the sea pressed itself flat against the rocks below our bedroom windows as if listening. I did not hear strings or see a light from heaven pour through the ceiling. I heard my heart knock once, heavy and astonished, and then I felt the cold hands of time clap slowly in the dark. Men like me plan for every contingency except hope. Hope arrives uninvited, puts its feet on the table, and laughs at your calendar. I embraced it. Then I dressed it in armor. Understand this. My announcement was not impulsive. Weeks before, I altered the architecture of my life in small, invisible ways. I signed addenda in ink that bites into paper. I created a ring of trusts that looked like mirrors facing mirrors. If you stared long enough, you could get lost and never come back. I also placed one simple clause, like a pearl in the center of a shell. On the day I became a father again, the company would enter a stewardship phase. My heirs would no longer inherit by default. They would earn, evidence-based, in public acts of stewardship measured by time and gravity. Cynics call it theatrics. I call it placing the weight where it belongs. You might be listening because scandal tastes sweet. If so, you will get your fill. But if you are listening because something in you knows the sound of a man trying not to drown in his own name, then listen closer. I did not do what I did as punishment alone. I did it to separate love from appetite. I did it because I have built too many towers to die in one. Subscribe and stay. Hear me to the end. You will not like me every minute. I do not care. There are people in this story who will look like villains until they don't, and people who will look like saints until they rot. There are rooms in this house with doors you think you know, and keys that won't turn until I say so. There is a child whose heartbeat I heard like a far drum, and the echo of that drum will accompany every decision I made after the laughter. If you want resolution without sacrifice, you are in the wrong house. If you want easy forgiveness, find another narrator. What I offer is a ledger, the kind that balances, even if the numbers make you swallow hard. I invited you because there is a pattern to power's cruelty that too few name. It laughs first. It does this to shape the air so you will breathe it in and question your own lungs. The antidote is simple and costs a fortune. Refuse the air. Bring your own. That night when they laughed, I inhaled something I had distilled over a lifetime. Discipline, patience, memory. Then I exhaled a plan. Stay with me. We are only beginning. The next room has softer lamps and sharper knives, and yet even there you will not see everything. Not yet, because the worst was yet to come. The first knife was the tabloid article that appeared 2 days after the dinner. The headline carried the oily certainty of a lie told often enough to wear a tuxedo. Sources close to the Whitmore family confirm the patriarch's infertility. The word close did a lot of work. They quoted a confidential health report, misnamed the specialist, and wrapped their gossip in biomedical jargon to make it look like truth with a stethoscope. It wasn't merely an attack on me, it was an assault on the possibility of my child. My attorneys surged like bloodhounds, all teeth and invoices, offering injunctions and libel suits and the satisfaction of crushing a paper in court. I told them to stand down. I have learned that when men who owe you favors show their hands, you do not slap them, you mark the cards. The second knife arrived as a correction, a legalese-laden letter from my son Daniel's counsel, requesting a review of family governance in light of recent health disclosures that might impact fiduciary confidence. My own child had turned my laughter into leverage. In my office, under the portrait of my father that made the room smell faintly of turpentine and judgment, I read the letter twice. The portrait seemed to smirk. I placed the paper on the desk, smoothed its edges with my palm, and felt the old ache of betrayal make a home behind my ribs. Grief changes shape, but it never leaves. Alina watched me in silence. She had been quiet since the dinner, a quiet with texture, like velvet that hides poison needles. When I finally asked if she was all right, she said she disliked the word all. "It is an impostor," she whispered, then turned her face to the window. She spent hours in the nursery. She had insisted we paint in a grey, so soft it looked like the sky when it forgives the morning. Sometimes I stood in the doorway and watched her fold tiny shirts. Sometimes I walked away before the tenderness in me became dangerous. I called in 3 people. First, Margaret Doyle, the only attorney I've ever met who could disarm a bomb while complimenting your tie. Second, Ezra Pike, my fixer, who once made a federal investigation vanish with a combination of lawful brilliance and the timing of a magician. Third, Dr. Rafael Mendez, the reproductive specialist who saved my pride from the cruelty of time and whose oath I trusted because I had seen him break a friendship rather than fracture his integrity. We met in my study, with the sea grinding its teeth outside and a storm searching the windows for an entry point. "Don't sue the paper yet," I told Margaret. "Make inquiries, quiet ones. I want to know who fed them and when. Ezra, I want the newsroom map, the editor's texts, everything you can gather without leaving fingerprints. Raphael, I need you to prepare a sealed statement, not for court but for me. The truth, distilled, not just that the pregnancy is possible, that it is ours." They did not ask why I didn't simply announce the obvious, that years ago I had my future frozen in liquid nitrogen. Pride is a fire that looks like dignity if you stand far enough away. I had not told anyone beyond this room because I refused to make my private bolstering a performance. I knew what the world would call it, vanity with a PhD. I wanted the child first, the proof later. But when men draw blood, you count your veins and plot the tourniquets. While they worked, I set my own trap. We announced the Whitmore Legacy Initiative, a project to fund maternal health clinics in every city where my factories once poured smoke into the sky. A billion-dollar apology that might one day be more than apology. I scheduled a ceremonial groundbreaking in Boston and invited everyone whose laughter had stung. The press release was velvet. The invitation had a condition invisible to the eye. Each guest would pass through a heritage gallery before cocktails, a corridor where portraits and artifacts from Whitmore history would hang. Hidden in the frames were cameras no larger than a beetle's back. What did I want to capture? Not crimes, patterns, who spoke to whom, which eyes darted, which shoulders touched and lingered. Conspiracies do not begin with declarations. They begin with sympathy offered like a handkerchief. I watched them bring their hunger to my charity, like vagrants in silk. Daniel standing too close to my general counsel. My niece whispering to the editor of that tabloid, the false friendly tilt of her head. My CFO, Randall, checking his phone with drugged regularity, face going grey, then pink, then grey again. Every gesture wrote a sentence across the air. I read quickly. A week later, Ezra placed a thin folder on my desk. Inside were the receipts of ugliness. The tabloid's source was an accountant in my own company. He had been paid by an entity that was itself an entity, a legal matryoshka doll whose final wooden face was the shell company my son Daniel uses when he does not want his face attached to impatience. The accountant had taken the lie from a friend close to the family, a friend with an accent traced to Odessa, and a photograph in Ezra's file labeled Alina's cousin. My hand shook. I will not lie to you. Rage is a wind that knocks books from shelves. The file floated for an instant above my desk, then landed neatly. "Bring him in," I said, but Ezra was already shaking his head. "Allow me," he said gently. "We do not want your fingerprints anywhere near this. We want their fingerprints on each other." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "And Alina?" The question hovered like a wasp you do not swat, because you suspect a nest nearby. I loved her. I did not trust her. Both can be true, and both can exist in the same bed. I needed proof. I needed motive. I needed the one thing money buys least reliably: clarity. We set the stage for a betrayal to confess itself. I arranged a meeting at the Beacon Club, the kind of old Boston room where leather lurks and oil portraits seem to listen. I let it leak that I would be there with a notary and a new draft of my will. The rumor was simple and nuclear. The unborn child would be declared sole heir to the Whitmore voting shares, with a guardianship council named from outside the family. I did not need to finish the sentence. The ones who wanted the crown would bring their knives unsheathed. They did, but they were not the only ones, because the worst was yet to come. Storms have a choreography. The air tightens, the world holds its breath, then something gives, and the sky discovers its lower register. The day of the Beacon Club meeting, the city wore the wrong season, a humid heaviness that made steel sweat. I took a private entrance, moved like a shadow down a hall that smelled like old victories, and sat in a corner that had belonged to a senator who used to pretend not to see me. Ezra sat 2 tables away with a newspaper and the kind of calm you only learn by walking away from fires after you confirm the children are out. Daniel arrived first, jaw set to the angle of entitlement. Randall slid in next, followed by my niece and the tabloid editor, who looked as if his tie choked him with gentle hands. They ordered nothing. The room's hush made their silence sound loud. I let them settle. Then Alina walked in. Her dress was a dark blue that made her look almost spectral. She did not see me. Her eyes were set on the table where the others waited. She took the seat at the head as if compelled by gravity. Watching my wife sit at the head of a table where my son and my CFO already sat was like watching a stranger put on my coat and find, to her surprise, that it fit. It was not shock that hit me. It was the realization that I had left the coat on a chair where anyone could try it. I did not storm over. I did not interrupt. I listened. Ezra's tiny recorder, disguised as a cufflink on the waiter's wrist, caught every syllable. It was not the language of conspiracy I had expected. No promises of murder, no talk of pushing anyone down a staircase or into the sea. It was something colder, arithmetic. They spoke of votes and proxies and rumor velocities. They discussed the rumor of my new will, as if it were both an insult and a riddle they could solve. Alina's voice was low, her accent thickening on certain words the way it does when she is tired or angry. She proposed stabilizing measures, words learned from my lips, and recommended a temporary oversight committee to ensure shareholder confidence. It was perfect. A theft wearing a lab coat. Daniel asked the question that still hurts when it echoes. Are you sure the child is his? The table held its breath. The city held its breath. I felt the building lean in. Alina did not answer quickly. When she did not say yes or no. She said, I'm sure he believes it, and that belief is our current reality. Something in me cracked softly, like a knuckle after a long day. Belief is our current reality. I had courted ambiguity in my life, the strategic kind, the kind that keeps options fluid and enemies sleepy. I had not expected it to arrive at my cribside. I stood up. The waiter turned, alarm flashing in the slight tremor of the tray. Ezra's newspaper folded with a sigh. The room noticed me the way old rooms do, with a rustle like old money counting itself. I walked to their table and took the empty chair at the far end. No one spoke. I watched them watch the version of me they thought had retired. Harold the negotiator, Harold the winter. The portrait of a founding member stared over my shoulder as if interested. "Let me save us all the trouble," I said. "There will be no oversight committee, at least not one chaired by those who stand to benefit from their own oversight. There will be no questioning of paternity in the court of gossip. There will be no more payments to little fraudulent newspapers that confuse envy with investigative journalism." I laid Ezra's folder on the table. Inside, every thread he had gathered shone. I watched recognition climb their faces like ivy on brick. Daniel found his voice first. "You had me followed." "I had you watched," I said. "Followed is for people who matter less, and I didn't need to watch much. You were sloppy. Grief has turned your impatience into a habit." He flushed. "Mother would be proud," I offered. "Mortified. Dead, Daniel. She is dead. Do not drag her bones into this." The editor stood abruptly, mumbling about appointments. Ezra appeared behind him like a seal placed where it would be most stylish. The editor sat. I turned to Alina last because I knew I must. Her eyes had the shine of someone who has not slept properly in days. She squared her shoulders and played the only card left. "Harold," she said, voice softening the edges of my name. "You have made enemies I do not understand. I was trying to protect what we have in the only way I could. You were negotiating my legacy as if it were a blanket to be cut into scarves," I said. "And you were deciding the fate of a child who isn't yet here, as if he were a lever, or she." A flicker crossed her face. Fear, anger, something else entirely. She folded her hands to stop them from shaking. "Tell them," she said, voice suddenly fierce. "Tell them what you are not telling." I knew what she meant. The frozen vials, the plan I had not disclosed, the truth that could crack the lie like an egg. In that split second I saw the shape of two futures. In one, I unsealed the letter from Dr. Mendez in front of them all, laid the science on the table like a gleaming sword, and cut the laughter in half. In the other, I let the storm rage longer to see what else it loosed from the trees. I chose the sword, not for them, for the child who would one day ask me why I let the world spit on his threshold. I placed the letter on the table. I broke the seal. I read. It was clinical and exact and final. The pregnancy was the kind a poet would call a miracle, and a doctor would call a protocol executed correctly. The child was mine. Not maybe, not likely. Mine. Silence has many flavors. This one tasted like burnt sugar. Randall exhaled, as if relieved to have an answer that would require different sins. My niece stared at her hands as if they had betrayed her. Daniel lowered his eyes because there is still a small boy in him who knows when he has been caught. Alina looked at me as if I had opened a door she had been pushing on for days. Something in her broke and mended in the same second. "I will be making one more announcement," I said, standing. "This afternoon." "What now?" Daniel snapped, petulance cracking through composure. "Now," I said, "I do what men like me do best when cornered. I buy the room." But the worst was yet to come. I did not buy the Beacon Club. I bought Whitmore Industries out of the version of itself that made my family sick. At 4 that afternoon, beneath the high lights of our headquarters, and in front of cameras that would carry my voice into living rooms where people who hate me would hate me more, I announced the Whitmore Covenant, effective immediately. All voting shares were transferred into a perpetual trust. The beneficiaries were not my blood alone, but my duty. Maternal health, workers' education, environmental reclamation in towns we had scarred. The family would receive dividends sufficient to live and to work without humiliation. Control, however, belonged to stewardship, not appetite. The guardians of that stewardship were named and diverse and already prepared to be disliked. I named Daniel to a seat he did not want and removed him from a throne that never existed. I named Alina to nothing at all. She stood beside me anyway, face calm, hands folded over the life inside her. The outrage came like weather. Commentators called me a traitor to my class. My class has never made room for traitors. It mistakes reform for betrayal. Lawsuits scraped at the edges of my covenant like waves at a cliff. They will go on scraping long after I am dust. That is the nature of certain tides. In private, my family howled. In public, they delivered statements written by men who can make silk out of smoke. I slept 12 minutes at a time and woke to the same drumbeat. The child, the child, the child. The night after the announcement, I found Alina in the nursery, standing in the half-dark like a statue guarding a ship in a storm. She did not look at me when she spoke. "I did not leak to the paper," she said. "My cousin did. For money. For pride, because envy is an old wound where I am from. I tried to manage your son. I thought I could eat his hunger before it ate us. You fed it," I said, not cruelly. "You fed it the only thing it wanted. Importance." She turned. Tears made her eyes look like glass marbles. "I am not your enemy," she said. "I am your consequence." The line hit me like a bell. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps every marriage is a ledger of consequences, the arithmetic of our omissions and our tenderness. We stood together and listened to the sea draw breath beyond the glass. In the weeks that followed, people stopped laughing. Ridicule is a currency that inflates quickly when confronted with math. The clinics began to rise. The Legacy Initiative signed the first partnership with a hospital that had once refused to put my name on a wing because power is shy about admitting it needs redemption. Mothers began to send letters to an address we published quietly. Ezra read them, then cried where no one would see him. Margaret took the first case pro bono that I can remember her taking. My son Daniel fled to Europe for a season because distance is a drug that sometimes works. I gave the tabloid a gift they did not deserve. I did not sue. I bought them, not to muzzle them, but to make them publish their retractions as front-page apologies and then force them to become a different thing. An investigative desk dedicated to the harm we do when money is our only language. People said I had lost my mind. Someone must lose it first so the rest can find theirs. On a quiet morning when the sea forgot to be angry, Alina's water broke. We drove to the hospital through streets still learning the shape of the new order. Labor is the oldest battle fought in peace. In the delivery room I held her hand while she clawed her way through fear to courage, through pain to a love that does not ask prices. When I heard my child cry, it did not sound like a drum. It sounded like a door opening in a house I thought was sealed. The nurse placed a small person on Alina's chest. We had not known the sex. We knew now. "Hello," I whispered to my daughter. They laughed. "Oh." She made a sound like a small machine discovering itself. We answered. Later, when the room dimmed and the monitors became a kind of lullaby, Alina spoke without looking at me. "You took everything from them." "I took nothing that was theirs," I said. "I took what was mine to give." "And what will you give her?" she asked, eyes on our child's impossible face. "Something I never gave my older children because I did not know how," I said. "A world in which love is not proof of weakness." Subscribe if you want to keep walking with me through the rooms of this house I just remade. Share this with those who laugh first. Tell them the truth costs more than a joke and is worth every cent. If you stay, you will see me falter. You will see me forgive or fail to. You will see my daughter grow, and you will learn that redemption is not a season. It is a muscle you exercise until it stops trembling when you lift something heavy. Keep listening. There are still rooms I have not opened to you, still names I have not spoken, still debts I have not paid. People will say, "I did this for legacy." They are wrong. I did it because I am dying, eventually like all of you, and I wanted to leave behind a map, not of my power, but of my limits. If that sounds like penance, so be it. If it sounds like pride, forgive me. Old habits bruise slowly. And still, even now, with a child's breath soft as moth wings filling the room, I feel the old wind at the windows. It will try to get in. It always does. We will let in the light instead. But the worst was yet to come.